All right, folks, we're going to start. First of all, thank you so much for coming to this session. I know it's the last session of the day, and so we definitely appreciate it. My name is Advait Joshi, AJ. I'm the Senior Product Manager in Microsoft's Management and Security Division. And this is Chris Norman, is our Senior Escalation Engineer working in the support team. So what we are planning to talk about today is how to manage and how to get reporting from Forefront Endpoint Protection using your existing System Center Configuration Manager infrastructure. Just one session before this, we had a session on how to use your System Center Configuration Manager infrastructure to deploy Forefront Endpoint Protection. And I see some familiar faces. I just want to know how many of you attended that session? Oh, most of you. Okay. Makes my job easier today. So the objective of this session was to actually do a deep dive into management options. In the last session, as most of you are aware, we covered how to deploy Forefront Endpoint Protection and how we architected Forefront Endpoint Protection using Configuration Manager. In this session, we're going to drill down into management options, reporting options, the dashboard alerts, and how you can get effective security management out of your existing infrastructure. So without further ado, because most of you have attended my earlier session, I won't dwell a lot into what is Forefront Endpoint Protection. Some of you who didn't get a chance to attend, Forefront Endpoint Protection 2010 is available today. It was released in December 2010, and it's the next version of Forefront Client Security. When we designed Forefront Endpoint Protection, we actually re-architected it completely, changed the architecture from FCS, or Forefront Client Security, which was based and built on Operations Manager, to now FEP being built on Configuration Manager. And at a broader level, we wanted to provide ease of deployment and scalability that Configuration Manager offers you. So you will be able to deploy it to almost 300,000 clients can be deployed using your existing Configuration Manager infrastructure. It also lets you, because we are using Configuration Manager, it also lets you deploy FEP on non-domain joined machines as well. The second pillar of benefits that we were looking at was enhanced protection. We have a session tomorrow specifically talking about the enhancements that we made in protection technology. So we have behavior monitoring that was enhanced. We have more proactive protection technologies like network inspection system, where we provide protection against network vulnerabilities. Those kind of things that we have introduced. You will get to know more about those things in tomorrow's session, where we do a deep dive in protection. But the point here was, when we were designing those protection technologies, we wanted to make sure that it provides lower impact on performance, and so we have achieved that. If you have used Microsoft Security Essentials, you will see that same similar client that we use, which provides you with great protection without any impact on your productivity. Another thing that we introduced in Forefront Endpoint Protection, which was not available in FCS, was ability to manage Windows Firewall with your Forefront Endpoint Protection. So one of the things that we'll show today in policy management is that part where you can also now manage Windows Firewall policies. And the last one is benefit was that we wanted to provide a single pane of glass, if you will. Wanted to have unified infrastructure, unified management. So it makes it easier on you to manage your policies, to get detailed reports out of your endpoint protection, and take remediation actions based on the visibility that you get. So in this session, we are going to focus on that last pillar, which is simplified desktop management. How can you get better policies? How can you get more efficient tracking system out of your Configuration Manager console and infrastructure? So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Chris, and he's going to go through the policy lifecycle. and I'll come back, talk about our vNext roadmap.
Thanks, AJ. Okay, so a lot of life cycles in IT. Policy is the same thing. And it starts at the requirements phase, defining what your business requirements are. And where we're actually going to start looking at this is in the create phase. How do we create policy in forefront endpoint protection? And then we'll move through deploying and monitoring. So policy lifecycle at a glance, policy creation. There's 3 places we can configure policy. We can do it in config manager. Well, we can do it in the configuration manager console, and we can do it in the group policy management console. That third place is what's called the FEP 2010 GP tool, which basically allows us to export configuration manager policy and turn it into group policy, and take group policy and turn it into config manager policy. So which one should I use? Should I use config manager or should I use group policy? It's a design choice. If you want unified management, if you want all of the policy reporting and everything to come up through configuration manager, you need to use config manager. If config manager is deployed on all computers, you're going to manage. Key here is if you're going to use non-domain joined machines, the only way to apply policy to them is through configuration manager. Group policy is much more granular. So if you don't want to have to dig deep into the anti-malware settings, config manager policy is easier to use. And if you don't ever need more than 1 policy per computer, even on your servers, then config manager is good. Group policy, big place where we've seen this, servers. A lot of customers, a lot of companies didn't want to put the configuration manager agent on their servers. So we use group policy to configure the policy. If you're well versed in group policy and you're very comfortable with managing group policies, then this is a good option. If you want extremely granular control, or if you prefer to layer policies, that is to apply more than 1 policy to a computer and have all the settings apply, then you're going to want to use group policy. So policy creation in the config console is pretty straightforward. There's a new policy wizard. Creates new policy based on templates. We've done a lot of work in templates with this release. We start off, we have 3 basic templates. Well, you can use one of the templates, or you can copy an existing policy and use it as a source, as a template. Or you could import it from policy from an XML file and use that as a template to start with. So we have 3 main templates for clients that you can choose from. We have a standard, a high security, and perf optimized. They pre-configure or have some settings for network inspection system, scheduled scans, how many scans are missed, throttling CPU, definition updates, and what we want to do with the firewall. We also have another option there is to apply workload templates. We've worked with different product groups within Microsoft, and we've come up with 16 initial templates that provide the recommended exceptions for these different workloads. Everything from SQL 2005 to Forefront Protection for Exchange, Hyper-V, IIS, Exchange in its different roles, both 2000 and 2010 because they're different. Even Configuration Manager, what policies should we be applying for Configuration Manager? We also deploy 2 default policies that get installed. These 2 are the desktop policy and the server policy. With the desktop, you get weekly quick scans, RTP on, default exclusions, the firewall enabled. These policies are assigned to the deployment succeeded and the deployed desktop collection. Basically, this ensures that if you push out FEP and you don't push a corresponding policy, that there will always be a default policy applied. Default server policy, no scheduled scan, RTP on, default exclusions, firewall not enabled. And this is assigned to the deployment succeeded, deployed server collection. Both of these policies, you can modify them and save them, but you can't delete them. We talked about layering policies. Within FEP, we have this concept of policy precedence. Familiar configuration manager computers can belong to multiple collections. So it's very possible, and actually more than likely, you're going to be a candidate for more than one policy. You know, if you deploy a policy to your all systems collection, out of the box, the client's going to have the all systems collection and the default server or the default client collection. Only one policy can be applied via config manager at a time. So we don't have the ability within config manager to combine policies. Precedence is used to determine the effect of policy. Once you define a policy, you have the ability to define its precedence. The higher the number, the better. You'll notice that the default desktop policy and the default server policy are always going to be set as 1 and 2. And you don't actually define a number. You just move the policies up and down in the stack. So, FEP 2010 policy management. We're going to hop right into a demo here. So, this is my configuration manager server. And we'll drop down in here into computer management and forefront endpoint protection. And you'll see policies node here. Notice we have default server, default desk, and it looks like someone's already created an Exchange Server 2010 policy. Let's see. Is it going to lock up on me now? All right, let's go back and try this again. There you go. We'll click on Properties, and we'll open up. These are just some general on the first tab. You know, you'll do this when you set it up. Description tells you what collection it's assigned to. Now, this is helpful in determining what systems should be getting a policy. And the bottom screen, the bottom tab, bottom pane here gives us just some information, what version, when it was originally created, who created it, the last time it was modified, and who was the last person to modify it. So we have the anti-malware section. A lot of these are probably pretty familiar, but scheduled scans, default actions, real-time protection, excluded file locations, file types, file process, advanced, override, spynet. Two things I want to focus on in this. Real-time protection. You'll notice we've got bidirectional scanning now. I can control if I want to scan incoming or if I want to scan outgoing, or I want to do both. Scan all downloaded files and attachments. Important for email when it saves it to the temp file before opening them. We can turn off behavior monitoring here. And this enable protection against network-based exploits. This controls whether or not the network inspection system, the network vulnerability shield is on. File locations, pretty straightforward. You see there are some very basic excluded that come in here. Basically, software distribution data store, that's the that's the Windows Update Client database. Excludes the default user profile. Advanced. Scan network drives when running a full scan. Basically, this is if I have a file, if I have a network drive mapped on my client and I'm running a full scan, do I want the FEP client to go out and actually parse that network drive and scan it? Not a good thing if it's a large drive. It could take a lot of time. Scan removable storage devices such as USB flash drives. This is during a full scan or a quick scan. if it tells it to scan the USB drive. When you insert a USB drive, RTP will automatically scan the boot sector on the drive, and then we'll try to scan as you access files on it. But the scan removal storage devices is for when you're performing a full scan. System restore points before cleaning computers. Quarantine management. If something's quarantined, how long before you want to delete it? Do you want to allow your users to configure your quarantine? And allow users the ability to define their own override or exclusions. Okay, overrides. You do it by threat. Here, you can remove, you can quarantine, or you can allow. As you'll notice, this list is blank. If you click the threat name here, it actually will launch. There we go. This is going to actually try to go out to the internet to help you locate the actual threat name you're looking for. We don't list the threat names in here, mainly because there's over 700,000 in our signature sets. And if we tried to populate this as a drop-down every time we opened up policy, it would never load. It'd never finish. Important gotcha here with policy. After you set your policy, and if you've defined overrides, if this list down here hasn't populated fully yet, and you click off and save the policy before it's finished loading, you'll actually wipe out all your configured overrides. So if you go down here into overrides, make sure this finished populating with any configured overrides before you close out the policy and save it. You could also configure overrides up here in the default actions. This is based on a category or a severity level, severe, high, medium, low. You'll notice with severe and high, the only actions you have are remove and quarantine. With medium, you have a remove, a quarantine, or allow. So if I wanted to create a new policy at this point, I'll go over here to the action bar and I'll select new policy. Come up and we'll give it a name. So give it a description. So I can select a policy type, whether I want to do a standard, desktop, performance optimized. I'm going to use a template, and I'm going to say this is an IIS 6 or 7. And we'll go ahead and hit the next, next. Now my policy is done. You notice, obviously, I didn't have a lot of configuration in there, but I can come back in here. Open up properties, anti-malware, and excluded processes. You'll see we've defined to exclude the W3WP process. And also added some additional locations. You'll notice the one thing that isn't in here is the website locations, where you're actually storing the data files for the website. You'll need to configure that. Updates. You see here we're configured for distribution from Configuration Manager or WSUS, and to fall back to Microsoft Update. We want to check every 8 hours, and we want to force an update when definitions have failed for 1 day. You'll also notice that I can move these around to define which source I want to check first. If I define UNC, then I come in here and I would add a UNC that it would then check. I can move it UNC to the top so it checks for it the first time. And then our Windows Firewall. You'll notice that Manage Windows Firewall, it turns it on by default. This is important for servers if you decide to turn this on. That is creating a policy. Now, how do you deploy a policy? Oops. Let's get back over here to the PowerPoint. So under the hood, what do we do? What's going on underneath when we create a policy? When you create or update a FEP in the policy console, after you're done, if it's a new policy, a program is created in the Config Manager policy package, and it's set to disabled. If you're just updating a package, the program's actually set to disabled. When you do the update, it actually causes a status message to be fired by Configuration Manager. And we have a filter in there that actually launches this utility called PLC Updater. And what it does is first, it ensures the default policies are present and up to date. If for some reason you manage to delete one of the default policies, first time this runs, it's going to recreate it. It will also update it if you've made changes to it. It actually creates the program and updates what's called the program's ISV data. The way we deploy a policy is every time you create a program in Configuration Manager, there's this WMI namespace that's called ISV data. We actually store our policy data in there. There's not an actual XML file or anything that's delivered to the client except for the default server policies. Anything you create is going to be in the ISV data WMI namespace. So it updates the client installation package with the default policies if needed. So if you've modified the default policies, it's going to update the client install package. Important thing here, it updates this package. It causes it to resync and re-replicate to all your distribution points. Those policy programs that we created earlier and set to disabled, at this point, they're set to enabled. And there's a script called applypolicy.vbs that is executed on the client. This is how we actually apply policy. If it's not present, it's created. If you're trying to troubleshoot an issue with policy creation, the admin UI logs look FEP policy source updater log. And this is where all activity of the PLC updater is logged and recorded. Policy creation within the Group Manager policy, Management Console. You import the ADMX and the ADML files. These are shipped on the install media. The ADMX files are the actual registry settings. The ADML is the string localizations. It requires GPMC on Windows Vista or Windows 2000 or later. And as you can see, it's got a few settings in there. So using the group policy tool, in this case we're exporting from Config Manager and importing it into a GPO. So we browse for the domain we want, we get the group policy object, and then we select a policy file, which is an XML file that would have been exported from Config Manager. And then the bottom one is clear existing forefront endpoint protection settings. So basically, if you're importing your exported policy into a group policy object that already has FEP policy or FEP settings defined, this will actually remove the FEP settings before it imports the new one. It won't affect any of the other GPO settings. So if you're using, say, for some reason you decide to put your FEP policy settings in your domain security policy, it won't remove those settings. It will just remove the FEP policy settings. Going from a GPO to Config Manager, you choose your domain, you choose the group policy object, and this time you select a policy file or an XML file that you want to export it to. You hit OK. It creates an XML file. You go into Config Manager, you select Import Policy, and you bring it in. So deploying policy, next step in the life cycle. Well, I got ahead of myself. Guess we're on to monitor. No, screen share. All right, so we are at policy deployment. So we use software distribution packages to deploy our software. This is, if If you're managing through Config Manager, we use distribution packages. If we're using group policy, it uses standard group policy methods. You can also do it during command line. There's a /policy switch for FEP install, and you can pass it a policy file name. After install, if you want to reapply a policy, there's a executable that's in the FEP directory called config security policy. You just call that, passing it the policy file. When you give it the policy file name, you need to give it the complete path to the file. It doesn't work with relative paths. So to assign to Configuration Manager clients from the Policies node, you just select a policy and you select Assign Policy. And then you select the collections you want to deploy it to. And it starts the process of deploying it out. You can verify that advertisements are created by just going to the packages and then looking at the Microsoft FEP packages, find the policy, and then look at the programs inside. So under the hood, what's really happening on the client side when it deploys policy? When it checks in, the Configuration Manager agent checks into the Config Manager server every so often to get what's called machine policy. By default, out of the box, it checks in once every hour. When you've advertised a new policy package to a client, the first time it checks in after the advertisement's been created and published, it will see that, hey, I've got this new policy. So it's going to download the information necessary to run this program. When the program starts, it calls applypolicy.vbs. The first thing it does is it checks to see on the local client if this namespace, the CCM_ISV_software policy class exists. Inside of there is where we store all our policy information for the client. Once it verifies that that's there, it then calls and gets machine policy and populates it. It then apply policy finds the highest precedence policy. And what it does is that it builds an index of all the policies that have been assigned to the machine and then compares the precedences. Once it identifies with the highest, it actually parses through that policy data and creates the actual XML file. That XML file is then stored in the CCM cache. Once the XML file has been created, it actually configures the security policy exe, or calls configure security policy exe, passing it the complete path to policy.xml. All of this, if you're having problems, you need to look and figure out what's going on. FEP apply policy, then the computer name.log file records all the actions taken by apply policy.vbs. All right, so let's hop over real quick and let's assign a policy. It's pretty quick, pretty straightforward. So I've got my test one that I created for IIS. And go over here and I'll select assign. And I'm going to add a collection here. And I want to go ahead and, Chicago's my IIS server, so I'll go ahead and apply it there. I can include sub-collections if I would like. Go ahead and click OK. I'm done and it's running, it's building everything. If I come up here to, or actually go to System Status, Advertisement Status, you'll see I now have an advertisement for deployment to Chicago. And you'll actually see we have everything accelerated, but the Chicago system has already received it and started the process once. All right, so monitoring policy to figure out what's being deployed, what's not. So we're really going to look here at the dashboards and reports. All of the information displayed in the dashboard reports status of program installations, and it's all comes up via the MIF files from Config Manager. Those MIF files cause the collection memberships to be updated, policy distributed. These collections are actually updated about every minute. So there's a refresh on the collection to refresh its contents about once a minute. If you can also manually reforce or refresh on the collection membership. The thing to remember is the update time from the Config Manager agent to the FEP server isn't immediate. It creates basically a status message. The status messages are dropped in a pickup folder, and they sit there for about, depending on when they go into that folder, it sends information up about every 15 minutes. So between the time change on the client happens till the dashboard's updated could be as long as 15 minutes. Troubleshooting, you can start with, you can look in the endpoint protection console on the client. It'll tell you policy name and the policy applied. This has an interesting policy in there. It's called the FEP policy, or cleanup policy. You won't actually ever find this one defined in the management console, but every deployment has it. Basically, this is just a way to enforce that if you've applied a policy to a machine and then you remove it, this goes in and removes those settings. It's a way to force removal of those settings. Troubleshooting policies, use the policy distribution report. So there's a distribution overview, there's distribution via specific collection, there's distribution via a collection for a specific state. Since policy distribution is really similar to client rollout because both of them use software distribution packages and advertisements, a lot of the same places that you would troubleshoot client deployment are the same places that you're going to troubleshoot policy deployment as far as, is the client getting the policy, is it being updated? So dashboard remediation, I want to monitor the health and I want to act on if policy drifts. So we have the FEP dashboard. It's the single pane of glass that you've heard us talk about. This allows the desktop management folks to see deployment issues, protection status, a quick overview glance. It provides nice breakouts. Most of the links, all of the links in there are active. Most of the time they go back to a collection. So, and then there's manual remediation actions that can be taken if they're out of compliance. So if you see machines showing up, their definitions are out of date, you can manually right-click on them and deploy a program to them through a software distribution package to force a definition update. You can also force full and quick scans. Another interesting collection is action needed under malware. Basically what that is telling you is I've had a machine that's been infected. We detected the malware and we cleaned the file, but to finish remediation, there's additional action needed. Most often this is a reboot. For some reason the user actually hasn't rebooted the machine yet. So let's go ahead and jump back in to Config Manager. And we'll go right to our dashboard here. You see we've actually got it populated here. I've got, in the deployment status, I've got 66 machines that have had forefront endpoint protection locally removed. I can click on that, and it takes me to the locally removed, and it gives me a list of all the machines that has been locally removed on. Go back to my dashboard, protection status. I've got 112 machines that are not reporting for some reason. I've got one pending policy distribution. I've got 2 machines that have definitions that are older than a week. Here's my forefront baseline compliance standards. If it's assigned, compliant, failed. All of these are backed off of collections. If I come to the FEP laptop, not reporting here. See who's not reporting to us. Looks like everybody's not reporting. No, that's not very good. This is actually populated data in the environment. But you can see they're all backed off of the collection. And the thing here is, then from here, if I want to figure out what's the status of this machine, I could run the computer details report, which actually now brings us into reporting. It launches report server. And first time report server spins up, it will sometimes take a little bit of time. And you see we can now scroll through this report. Gives us a lot more information, gives us protection status. You can see the last time this machine actually, the definitions that are currently loaded on it are back from July 9th of last year. I can see malware activity. This tell me if there's any current incidents or any statistics for the month. All right, so I think we were getting into reports. Like we talk about, they're security minded, so they're very operationally driven, but the ability to conduct investigations through them, focus on compliance capabilities. It's back-ended on SQL reporting services. So with SQL reporting services, I can export. I can also build subscriptions. So if I've got someone who needs an overall health of my enterprise report, they can get it emailed to them on a daily basis. And also it's access from any browser, so they don't even actually have to log in to get access to this information. And they're extensible. We can create your own custom reports with a shared schema. All right, so take a minute and we'll look at some custom reports. So, two different ways we've done this. One of them is we have published a spreadsheet to the web. You find it through our blog or in the TechNet documentation. But basically what this allows us to do is use the power of Excel pivot tables to quickly look at some of the data that's in the data warehouse. So let's see, where did I put that worksheet? Okay, I've lost the worksheet. All right, let's look at custom query. I worked a case with a large university, and what was going on is they had a custom third-party compliance tool that they needed to import the data that was being collected by FEP and Config Manager into, so they could prove their compliance as far as anti-malware and the status. And so what we did here is I worked with the PFE Premier Field Engineer, and we built a custom query that basically exports that data. What happened to my data? demo guys do not like me today. Oh, that's why I can't find it. Okay. All right, so this is the query we built for that those people in Colorado, and basically we used what's a view in the FEP data warehouse. It's called current deployment and protection state, and current deployment and protection last state. And we basically selected out of there the version of the engine, the virus. Version of the definition, and the creation date, and joined it against a config manager table with the computer IDs. And when we execute the query, and see, it would just come back and it gives us all of the machines and gives us their engine version and the signature version and the dates it was all checked. They were then able to take this and save it off into a text file and import it into their own compliance software that they were using. So if you look at the databases and we look at the FEP DW and you look at views, you can use all of these views that are in here to build your own custom queries to define information that you need to pull out. Now, looking at the Excel, what we do is we use data source. We build a custom data source that connects it to the FEP server, and then pulls out of this normalized detection history log. And what we end up with, come in here and data, and let's refresh the data so see we pull out of it. And all right. So if you come into the data log, and all these instructions are in this spreadsheet that you download. You can come in here, properties, and we'd actually select this connection name that we had built earlier. And the way we do that is you come up here and data from other sources. We get it from a SQL server. I would give it the server name. In this case, it's the Fargo, because that's the local server that we're using for our data warehouse. Select the database we want to use. FEP DW is the FEP data warehouse, and then the site that you've installed, the configuration manager site that you've installed it in. And there's all our views that we can use to select from. And then you get information where you want to store the connection file, description of it so you remember what it is later, and friendly name, and you hit finish. Cancel that. And then we can modify these. And then these are pivot tables that are built based off of this detection log. So you can then break down by malware list, by timestamp, by FEP computer. So using Microsoft Office and pivot tables in Excel, we can expand upon it. We can write custom queries against it. If you're familiar with RDL, which is the report definition language used by SQL Server reporting services, you can also build your own reports and run against the FEP data warehouse. All right, FEP alerts, alerting. When something happens, people want to be notified about it. When we were looking at alerts, we had several pillars or guidelines that we wanted to use when defining them. One, they had to be actionable. The action had to be associated with an alert. Timely, they had to be expected, and there had to be an accepted delay for an alert to reach its destination. Manageable. We didn't want to cause a broadcast storm on a malware outbreak. We didn't want to flood people's inboxes with emails. So we had to be able to manage the number and types of alerts that were given. And we need to be able to configure based on sensitivity. Not everything needs to be alerted on the same. So security alerts in Forefront Endpoint Protection and FEP rely on Config Manager and the FEP data up flows. Data up on Config Manager with FEP 2010 will take approximately 40 to 45 minutes, best case. So anywhere, actually best case will probably get you about 30. Average case will be about 45 minutes. Could go as far as 120 minutes. Totally dependent on how your configuration is set up, how many sites you need to replicate between. All our alerts are done via email notifications, and they're all threshold based. So we have 4 basic alerts: malware detection, malware outbreak, repeated malware. These are all single target or single event alerts. These are all multiple targets. You select a collection to monitor. So you're looking at collection of computers. You set the sensitivity and configure the SMTP address, stuff you want it to send to. When you configure an alert on collections, any sub-collection below it also inherits that alert. So malware detection is malware's been detected on a computer. Malware outbreak is a specific malware is being detected in your environment on multiple computers. You set the threshold of the number of computers you want it before it fires. Repeated malware, the specific malware is detected multiple times on the same computer. So a lot of times you'll see reinfections because a vulnerability hasn't been patched or the user's behavior is constantly downloading and malware. So if you get specific, if they're downloading the same thing, it will fire off the repeated malware alert. And you set the computers to monitor the collection and the number of detections and the detection interval. So I can set it and say it alert if I see more than 3 infections of the same malware in 15 minutes, or I can set it 5 and 24 hours. Then multiple malware, so we're looking at a single computer again here, and the number of malware types. So we're looking at multiple different malware types. So malware writers nowadays with the Trojan, the droppers they use, it's kind of a fire and forget method. They pack numerous pieces of different malware in there and hope something gets in, something stacks, or something infects the machine. This alert's good if to trigger an investigation. If you detect 3 on a machine, 3 different types of machine in a certain interval, they may have gotten a dropper and you may have missed something. So all of these really, the expected action from the administrator is, open the detailed report from the computer, figure out what's going on, learn about the malware, and base your reaction, your next actions on that. All right, and we'll turn it back over to AJ and let him go into FEP 2012.
All right, guys. So you just saw management and reporting options that are available for you in FEP 2010. Most of you attended our earlier session, and there we went into some more details on what's going to be available in Feb 2012, and what's coming, what's our roadmap for the vNext of Feb. So Feb 2012 beta was made available today. It was released today, so you can get it for your evaluation. It's basically built on Configuration Manager 2012, and Configuration Manager 2012 is planned to be released in late this year. So Feb 2012 will be part of that release as well, and obviously we wanted to make sure that vNext of Feb is supported on Configuration Manager. So that was our idea on providing Feb 2012 beta. We have done new enhancements, specifically in deployment. We wanted to make it easier. So you will see a simplified hierarchy. You can install Feb components on just one config manager central administrative site, and that will give all the components to all the primary sites as well. So you don't have to install different components on primary sites. Just one install for Feb, and you're done. The other thing we have introduced is role-based access control. So now you can define different roles for administrators. A security admin can be different than your policy admin, or an admin who can just deploy policies versus an admin who can do desktop management. So you can define granular permissions on what an admin can do. In this case, you could have a separate admin just for security, and that admin can get access to collections, access to objects based on the permissions you have defined. The couple of other things that we have done, definition updates now can be done using existing distribution points through Config Manager. So in the Config Manager console, you can define automatic deployment rules and get your signature updates for Feb using the same distribution system and not have a separate WSUS server. The last one is improved alert timings, which is Feb now gets a high-speed channel that is dedicated to get information out of Feb client to Configuration Manager server. That quickens the information that we get from Feb client and gives you alerts as well as reports in a better time than it is supported today. Couple of things I'm actually going to show you in Feb 2012 related to this session is reports, the new reports that we are working on, as well as some changes, some enhancements that we have done in the policy option for Feb 2012. If you want to evaluate Feb 2012, as I said, it's already available as of today afternoon. So you can go to our website and download the evaluation beta. Or you can also join our community evaluation program. It's a program that will enable you to participate in a community of peers and evaluate it together. Those links are included in the deck, and you can download the deck after we are done. So let me go to the demo box and actually show you Feb 2012. So this is a Configuration Manager 2012 console. It's a rich console that is dedicated for Configuration Manager and gives you a lot of granular options in a better way, better than what we had in Config Manager 2007. Feb is now completely integrated as well as more embedded in this console. So for example, you don't have a separate Feb section. You have Feb status in monitoring section itself, or you would have to go to assets and compliance to define different policies. Since we are talking about monitoring and alerting in this session, this is the change that you see in Configuration Manager 2012 and Feb 2012. Again, the concept is similar. So you can, in single pane of glass, you can monitor your Feb deployment, monitor the security status in your environment. So all of these links are actionable, right? So if you click on protection service off, or overview of protection status, it's actually going to go to a collection and show you the details of which machines are protected, which are not. or one computer has FEP deployed. It's actually going to give me a collection and show which machine has been deployed with FEP. So in this case, Melissa's laptop, our end user, has been deployed with Forefront Endpoint Protection. So similarly, in the same section of assets and compliance, we have FEP policies. And Chris showed you how to define and deploy policies in FEP 2010. It's a similar way of defining policies in FEP 2012. You can define a new policy from here. There's one enhancement that we have made in the policy. So I'm going to create a new policy called test. And this is the difference that we have done here. So one similarity is that we still have these standard templates that we have provided. The templates are important because these are the best practices that we have given you predefined. Right? We have worked with different server teams, different client teams, understood what are the best settings that you need to define. So when you think of high security settings for a client, we have already predefined those settings in this template, so you get best practice. You can just use this template to deploy it to your clients. You don't have to think about doing any other settings. In this case, I'm going to use other policy template, and this is the change that I was talking about. That Chris showed you different templates. In fact, he defined a policy for an IIS server. In 2007, we gave you that best practice for IIS 7. But what happens if you had an IIS server as well as Exchange server on top of it? You wouldn't want to do it, but what if you had multiple roles in one server? In that case, you would have to go select one template and then manually make changes in that policy, so you'll have multiple roles covered. In this case, in 2012, what we are working on is, what we have defined is ability to layer different policies. So now I can add a policy for DHCP, and I can also add a policy for domain controller. So I can layer these policies, and that's it. I'm done. I've got all the best practices from Microsoft for defining an anti-malware policy for a domain controller and DHCP. I've combined them, and I'm done. I've defined a policy called test. Now again, the deployment of policy is similar to what Chris showed you. You have to assign the policy to specific collections. In this case, in Configuration Manager 2012, the difference is that they have a paradigm shift in way it was designed. So you could now also deploy these policies for a user collection. There is a when they were architecting it, they architected it based on user device affinity. So they can correlate now in Configuration Manager. You can correlate user impact based on different collections. You can correlate user activity to devices. So a user can have multiple devices. A user can, in fact, in our example, Melissa can have a virtual device. She can access a physical device. She can access a slate. But in Config Manager 2012, you can deploy a policy that can provide a consistent experience to her. So we can push application to Melissa for a virtual experience, physical experience, what have you. That same concept will be used in FEP, and you can deploy policies as well as get information based on user as well as correlated for user and machine. So what I'm going to show you is report from Config Manager. This is something we have been working on. Oops. Why is this? This is what I want. Okay. So this report is anti-malware activity report. This is similar to what you get in FEP 2010. So what Chris was showing you was a report from our demo environment. So that's why it was not populated, or you saw some old information there. It was from a demo environment that was populated. This is something that is real. We have been working on this. So a similar report for FEP 2012. This is an anti-malware activity report, and it gives me an overview of malware activity in my environment, right? Now, it also gives me an option, and this is similar in 2010. You can do that in 2010 as well. This is more populated. But you could also go into details of a specific malware. And that specific details, I'll get information on what that malware has done, the impact of malware on a traditional list of machines here. So what you're seeing here is what you would get in Feb 2010 as well. The next thing, which is really exciting for me, is the ability to provide user-based data. Now you are able to get impact based on usernames as well. So you know which user is impacted by that malware, which means now you can also get impact of business, like business impact, and take appropriate remediation actions. This is not in beta. This is what we are working on post-beta. So you will see this type of user-based reports closer when we go to RTM. So at the release time, we hope to have these reports. But I wanted to share with you what we are working on. And part of this session was reporting. And so these are the reports that you will see in Feb 2012 and onwards. That the ability to correlate user activity, user impact, malware impact, and machine names as well. So those were the new things in Feb 2012. At this time, I want to go back to my presentation. So in summary, we just wanted to close on the fact that now you have the ability to unify your desktop management infrastructure and endpoint protection infrastructure. You can have one infrastructure, configuration manager, to deploy and manage forefront endpoint protection. You can get rich reports, and going forward in 2012, we'll see more granularity and more enhancements added to it as well. And lastly, Feb 2012 beta, if you want to evaluate it, if you want to see the new features in it, it's available to you. Please join our community as well, and help share your best practices, what you are doing. There are other, there are 600 other users like you in community for configuration manager. You can join it. There is a lot of sharing of best practices or what is happening in their network, your network. So you can help that community as well. With that, I wanted to call out one more session that is tomorrow morning, where we are doing a deep dive into protection technologies. So there you will be able to see the investments that we have made in the Microsoft anti-malware engine and proactive protection that you can get with Feb 2010, as well as going forward our investments in Feb 2012. And then there is another session with our MSIT folks who are going to share how did we deploy Feb 2010 in our organization. In Microsoft, we have 300,000 plus clients, and it's a significant amount of work, but it's a compelling story of how they planned and how they deployed Feb using very less resources. In fact, there was only one server that was added for reporting. So that session is on Thursday. All the list of these sessions are given here, but I would encourage you to join those two sessions definitely. With that, if there are any questions, I would welcome any questions or any thoughts, anything that you would like to share. So any questions, let us know. Yep, there is a question.
Will there be any ability to add custom threats? So specific executable in your environment that you don't classify as a threat, we do.
Want to take it?
Not that I'm aware of from the, but the session tomorrow morning, those are the guys to talk to about that.
Are you talking about exclusions though? Or
No, I think he's,
specific threats?
Specific file, if I detected it, I want to delete it.
Any other question? All right. Thank you so much. Please provide your evaluation, and we really appreciate your coming to this session. If you have any other questions, please meet us in the expo hall. We have a forefront booth there, and all of us are there as well for the entire week. Thank you again. Good night.